The story kicks off with a train pulling into the old west town of Flagstone. A group of men hangs around the station, looking suspiciously alert as the train unloads its goods. At first, it seems like no one's getting off, but as the train starts leaving, a man steps out, casually playing a harmonica. This guy, who we'll just call Harmonica, wastes no time asking the waiting men about someone named Frank. They tell him Frank sent them, leading Harmonica to assume they're there to take him somewhere. Turns out their actual plan is to kill him. Harmonica, however, flips the script, pulling his gun and taking them out, though he gets injured in the process. Meanwhile, the focus shifts to a boy named Timmy, who's out hunting with his dad, Brett. They live on a nice piece of land with a house perched on a hill. Just as Brett is about to have lunch with his kids, a gunshot shatters the peace. Thinking someone's hunting nearby, Brett doesn't expect what happens next. His daughter is struck and collapses, and then another shot kills Brett himself. Timmy runs out of the house to find his family slaughtered. At the same time, Brett's wife, Jill, has just arrived at the train station, wondering why Brett hasn't come to pick her up. Deciding to head home alone, she takes a horse-drawn carriage, stopping at a small diner on the way. While she chats with the diner's owner, gunfire erupts outside. A man named Cheyenne walks in, handcuffs on his wrists, causing everyone to eye him nervously. From a corner of the room, the sound of a harmonica cuts through the tension. Cheyenne walks over to the player, our guy Harmonica, and after a brief exchange, has one of the patrons shoot off his handcuffs. Soon, Cheyenne's gang arrives to pick him up. Harmonica, mistakenly thinking Cheyenne is one of Frank's men, confronts him about the attempt on his life. Though tensions rise, they don't come to blows, and Cheyenne leaves. Jill finally makes it home, only to find a crowd gathered outside. To her horror, she learns her entire family has been killed. Devastated, she buries her loved ones and is soon informed that clues have been found pointing to the killers. The sheriff orders a manhunt, but Jill, despite being urged to return to New Orleans, insists on staying. Sweetwater, her family's land, is her home. Elsewhere, Harmonica corners a man named Wobbles to find out where Frank is. Wobbles denies knowing anything, even under threat, so Harmonica lets him go. That night, Jill hears the eerie sound of a harmonica outside her house. Terrified, she grabs a rifle and fires wildly into the darkness. The next morning, Jill opens her door to find Cheyenne and his gang waiting. Assuming they're responsible for her family's murder, she confronts Cheyenne, but he denies any involvement. Meanwhile, the real culprit, Frank, meets with a businessman named Morton. Morton is trying to build a railroad through Sweetwater, but Brett had refused to sell the land, planning instead to profit by building a watering station. Frustrated by Brett's resistance, Morton hired Frank to scare him off. Instead, Frank went too far and killed Brett and his family. Morton, worried this will attract too much attention, orders Frank to fix the mess. However, Frank has his own plans. He wants Sweetwater for himself. While Morton wields money as his weapon of choice, Frank relies on brute force and guns. Back at Sweetwater, Jill, still reeling from her loss, vows to uncover the truth and protect her late husband's land. Cheyenne, seeing her determination, suggests she deserves a better life, but Jill won't back down. Before leaving, Cheyenne comments that she reminds him of his mother, who raised him alone. Later, while Jill is at the stable, Harmonica shows up out of nowhere, startling her. The encounter is tense, but soon Harmonica notices two of Frank's men spying on them. Playing it cool, Harmonica walks to the well with Jill, acting unarmed. When the men emerge, thinking they've got an easy target, Harmonica surprises them by drawing a pistol hidden in his jacket and killing them. Cheyenne, who watches from a distance, seems impressed. Determined to get answers, Jill meets with Wobbles and demands he deliver a message to Frank. She knows Frank is behind her family's death and is ready to confront him. Wobbles, tired of being dragged into the mess, reluctantly agrees. Jill isn't just seeking revenge. She wants to negotiate control over the railroad that now runs through her land, which is entirely hers after Brett's death. After Jill leaves, Wobbles heads to the station to meet Morton and Frank, who are already on the train. Though Wobbles denies working with Frank, he's actually under Morton's command. Wobbles passes on Jill's message to Frank and Morton. While he's doing that, Frank notices someone outside the train. It's Harmonica, who's been secretly following Wobbles. Realizing Harmonica is on the roof, Frank signals the conductor to start the train. Harmonica soon realizes the train is picking up speed, so he climbs down, but Frank spots him and pulls out his gun. Frank grabs Harmonica's pistol and orders his men to tie him up. Angry that Wobbles has allowed someone to tail him, Frank throws Wobbles off the train. As this happens, Wobbles spots Cheyenne hiding under the train and signals for him to stay quiet. Wobbles tries to warn Frank, but Frank, annoyed, decides to take him out. Frank turns his attention to Harmonica, who seems to know him but isn't recognized by Frank. Curious, Frank asks Harmonica who he is. Harmonica mentions some names that Frank is familiar with, but Frank knows they are all dead. Frustrated, Frank slaps Harmonica several times, but Morton reminds him about their plan to take over Jill's property. Frank decides that getting rid of Jill is more important than dealing with this mysterious man and gets off the train with his men. Meanwhile, Harmonica, still on the train, spots Cheyenne, who's come to rescue him. Cheyenne's sharp mind and great shooting skills take out Frank's men. He decides to spare Morton because of his illness, which makes it hard for him to walk. In Sweetwater, Jill is surprised to find construction materials her late husband ordered. She quickly realizes Brett intended to build a station and rushes inside to find a model of the station he had created. She can't find the model, though, until Frank appears, holding it in his hands. At the same time, Harmonica and Cheyenne team up to help Jill defend her land by starting the construction of the station, just as Jill's late husband wanted. Meanwhile, at Frank's hideout, he intimidates Jill and forces her to auction off her land so he can take over. The next day at the auction, no one bids on her land at the price she wants. It turns out Frank's men have been threatening the bidders to keep the price low so Frank can snatch it up. With no one daring to bid higher, one of Frank's men offers the minimum price, $5,000. Just when it seems like the auction is over, Harmonica steps up and bids $5,000, matching the bounty on Cheyenne's head. To save Jill, Cheyenne reluctantly agrees to turn himself in. Soon after, Frank shows up, clearly annoyed by Harmonica's interference. He offers $5,000 to buy Jill's land from Harmonica, but Harmonica refuses and heads upstairs. As Frank leaves, he realizes his men have betrayed him. It turns out Morton bribed his men to turn on Frank because he was tired of his reckless ways. Meanwhile, Harmonica, from upstairs, realizes someone's planning to kill Frank. Despite their history, Harmonica decides to save him. Frank, realizing his men have betrayed him, is confused as to why Harmonica helped him. He then discovers Morton's train has derailed and his men are dead. Frank finds Morton still alive but severely injured. Frank considers killing him but decides to let him die on his own since he's beyond saving. In Sweetwater, Cheyenne has managed to escape from law enforcement and goes to Jill's house for a cup of coffee. Jill wonders why Harmonica is outside, almost as if waiting for something. Cheyenne explains that Harmonica has unfinished business with Frank, and their showdown is coming soon. Sure enough, Frank arrives on horseback, ready for a final confrontation with Harmonica. The two prepare for a duel, which will settle who comes out on top. But for Harmonica, this is more than just a fight. It's personal. He's seeking revenge for his brother's death at Frank's hands. A flashback reveals a young Harmonica trying to keep his older brother alive after Frank ordered his execution. In the past, Frank had shoved a harmonica in the young boy's mouth, causing him to accidentally kill his brother. Back in the present, Harmonica, now determined, fires a fatal shot at Frank. As Frank is dying, he once again asks Harmonica who he is. Harmonica pulls out the harmonica he always plays and shoves it into Frank's mouth, just as Frank did to him years ago. At that moment, Frank remembers that Harmonica was the boy who lost his brother because of him. Jill, realizing Harmonica has finally avenged her family, feels a sense of closure. As Harmonica enters the house, Jill smiles at him, but quickly realizes he's planning to leave now that his revenge is complete. She tells him she hopes he'll return to Sweetwater one day. Harmonica and Cheyenne leave together, but Cheyenne suddenly collapses, revealing he's gravely injured from his escape. Realizing Cheyenne doesn't have long, Harmonica decides to rest for a bit. Soon after, Cheyenne dies. Sympathetic, Harmonica places his friend's body on his horse and continues his journey. Back in Sweetwater, construction on the railroad continues. Jill, who managed to defend her land thanks to Harmonica and Cheyenne, is seen offering water to the workers. The station that was her husband's dream is now being built, honoring his legacy.